Ready to dive into Jane Austen's world and Pride and Prejudice? We're going deep, using those excerpts you sent over to uncover what life was really like back in 19th century England. Think courtship rituals, family drama, and the constant pressure of society. Should be interesting.
It's a world where love and marriage,
Yeah,
not always a package deal, especially for women.
totally. And no one shows us that better than Mrs. Bennet. Her whole world seems to revolve around getting her daughters hitched. Why so focus on husbands for them?
You got to remember, for women back then, marriage, it wasn't about romance, it was survival, practically.
Survival.
Oh, yeah. Inheriting property, not really a thing for women. Respectable jobs, almost unheard of. Marriage was their economic safety net,
Yeah.
kept them out of poverty.
Wow. Suddenly, Mrs. Bennet's energy to get her daughters married makes a lot more sense. Kind of sad when you see it that way, especially since her husband's, well, not exactly losing sleep over it.
Mr. Bennet. Now there's a character study. Happy to watch the drama unfold. Occasionally teases his wife about it, but never jumps into that marriage market frenzy himself.
Leaving Mrs. Bennet to handle those social pressures and snag those good matches for their daughters.
Exactly. And it's not just them caught in this either. Remember Sir William and Lady Lucas?
Vaguely. Remind me.
They decided to visit Bingley just because he might be husband material for one of the Bennet girls. Shows how these societal pressures, they spread way beyond one family.
Like this unspoken pressure cooker to make the right connections, Affects everything they do, even casual visits. Everyone's playing the game, whether they want to or not.
Austen really nails that, how these expectations become this invisible web controlling everyone's lives. But even in this world of tradition and pressure, she gives us characters who push back. They want to write their own stories. Which brings us to Bingley and, of course, Mr. Darcy.
Oh, those two. The moment those eligible bachelors show up, it's like lighting a match next to a firework. Austen uses their arrival perfectly, sets the stage with Bingley instantly falling for Jane.
And then there's Darcy, infamous first impression at that ball. Flat out refuses to dance with Elizabeth. Tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, can you imagine?
Way to make an entrance, right. But we know Elizabeth. She doesn't back down. Turns that insult into a joke, shows off her independent spirit, and bam. The stage is set for their clash of personalities. That clash, all that Pride and Prejudice, that's the heart of the story.
A conflict that's amplified by another big factor in their world. Gossip.
The fuel of any good social circle, right?
Exactly. We can't forget reputation was everything back then. Rumors spread faster than wildfire.
So true.
And Mrs. Bennet and her friends, they're practically architects of perception,
Wow.
Shaking opinions, fueling those misunderstandings with their constant interpretations, and, let's be honest, exaggerations.
And who better to take advantage of all that gossip than the charming but ultimately not so great Mr. Wickham? He really throws a wrench into things, especially with his completely made-up story about being wronged by Darcy.
Wickham, he's a pro at manipulation, knows exactly how to play on Elizabeth's dislike for Darcy, making her doubt him even more.
A perfect storm, right. Social pressure, bad first impressions, and a whole lot of gossip. The drama is definitely building. So, where does Austen take us next in this web of social intrigue?
Well, just as the Bennet sisters think they've, navigated those first impressions, Austen throws them a curveball. Mr. Collins arrives on the scene.
Ah, yes, Mr. Collins. Mr. Bennet's heir and a walking, talking example of Austen's social satire. What'd you make of him? Always found him kind of frustrating, but impossible to look away from.
Oh, absolutely. He's this caricature of awkward ambition. Totally fixated on anyone he thinks is above him socially, like his obsession with Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Desperate to please her. It's practically a parody of social climbing.
And his proposal to Elizabeth. Talk about missing the mark. He's listing reasons why she should be grateful to even be considered totally oblivious to actual affection or even basic social cues.
And that rejection, that's pure Elizabeth. It would have been so easy, even expected, for her to say yes. He's financial security, especially in a time when women had so few options. But she sticks to her guns. Risks her future rather than a loveless marriage, even with her family breathing down her neck.
Which makes Charlotte's decision to accept his proposal even more, well, I don't know, jarring. It's the opposite of Elizabeth's idealism. Really highlights the tough choices women faced back then.
Charlotte's a pragmatist. She knows society's limitations and picks the path that offers stability, even if it means no romance. Austen's brilliant. She doesn't make either choice right or wrong, She makes us think about the forces at play, makes us empathize with both of them.
It's like this unspoken acknowledgement of just how few options women had, even those from well-off families. But Austen doesn't stop there. Just as we're digesting that, she slams us with another twist. This time, it's Darcy and Elizabeth front and center.
All that tension that's been simmering, it boils over with Darcy's first proposal.
Which is about as romantic as a tooth extraction, let's be real. His arrogance, clueless about Elizabeth's feelings, it's almost hard to read.
He's genuinely floored by her rejection, and the way he talks about her lower social status, like it's a minor inconvenience he's overlooking, shows how blinded he is by his own, well, everything.
But Elizabeth's reaction, her anger, calling him out, it forces him to actually look at himself. And that leads to a turning point. The letter.
Ugh, Austen and letters. Genius move every time. This letter is Darcy at his most vulnerable. He's terrible at expressing himself in person, but on paper, all those feelings, all those reasons just come pouring out.
And suddenly, the power dynamic shifts. He exposes Wickham as a liar, defends his actions, and becomes a real person. Makes Elizabeth confront her own judgments too.
Huge turning point for both of them. Darcy takes a step towards self-awareness, admits his flaws, and Elizabeth, she starts to see cracks in the image she had of him.
But just as Elizabeth starts to see a different Darcy, the other shoe drops, and the whole Bennet family is thrown into chaos.
Oh, yeah. Always impulsive. Elopes with Wickham. It's a scandal, the kind that could have ruined them.
Talk about a reminder of how fragile reputation was, especially for women. One wrong step and everything falls apart.
And here goes Darcy, the unlikely hero. He makes sure Wickham marries Lydia. Doesn't matter the cost to himself, even his own reputation. That says it all.
It's selfless, an act of love and loyalty, not just to Elizabeth, but to her whole family. Even Austen seems to be saying, okay, Darcy's the real deal.
And with that, we're set up for this ending that's both satisfying and makes you think. Choices and their consequences, human nature, all against the backdrop of these societal rules.
So Lydia's crisis is averted, but what about our main pair? Will Darcy's actions be enough to bridge the gap between him and Elizabeth? So Darcy, he's gone from prideful to practically heroic. How does Elizabeth wrap her head around that?
That's Austen's magic, right?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, no snap judgments. Elizabeth's change of heart, it's gradual. She thinks, she observes, and slowly things start to shift.
Like that scene at Pemberley, Darcy's estate. Right. They've run into each other completely unexpected.
Exactly. And Darcy, he's like a different person. Gracious, welcoming. He even invites Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle to meet his sister, Georgiana. Seeing his kindness, his warmth, that's when Elizabeth really starts to question things.
And it's more than just how he acts, right? At Pemberley, they actually connect. Shared interests, witty banter. It's a side of their relationship we haven't seen before.
They see the person behind the societal masks, appreciate each other's intelligence. It's a breath of fresh air compared to their earlier, super formal encounters.
And then, of course, Darcy proposes again, night and day compared to that first disaster.
This time, it's all heart, no pretense. He owns his mistakes, his arrogance, even admitting he interfered between Bingley and Jane.
Yeah.
But more importantly, he tells Elizabeth how much he admires her, accepts her, flaws and all.
And that's the moment, I think. Vulnerability, honesty. Elizabeth sees the real Darcy, the man he could be if society wasn't holding him back. Proof that self-awareness and humility can change everything.
Their whole journey, from enemies to lovers, it tells us to never trust first impressions. Austen wants us to look deeper, question our own biases, see the potential for growth, for understanding.
Totally. But it wouldn't be an Austen novel without a dose of reality, right? We're happy for Darcy and Elizabeth, but what about Lydia and Wickham? Not exactly a fairy tale ending for them.
Their marriage, it stopped a scandal, sure, but it shows that not everything wraps up perfectly. Wickham, still selfish, still irresponsible.
A good reminder that actions have consequences, even in a world of romance and happy endings.
And that's what makes Pride and Prejudice so brilliant. Love, societal pressure, personal growth.
Yeah.
It's all there, told with wit and intelligence that still resonates today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Austen's world, what's the takeaway from Elizabeth and Darcy?
Maybe it's this. Be open to change. In ourselves, in others. Elizabeth had to confront her own prejudices, right? We can do the same. Let's question our assumptions, try to really understand each other.
Because who knows, maybe by doing that, by being open and empathetic, we'll find those unexpected connections, those relationships that truly matter, just like they did